Hey guys, what's up? It's Alex or Nuznuz here, and welcome to my ultimate AFK money making guide for RuneScape 3. Now this video is going to have a ton of different methods, and these will all be updated, and most of these I've never covered before, but some of them I have, but I wanted to include them so you have a cohesive place for all your AFK money making needs. Now this video is going to be similar to my ultimate money making guide, the most popular video I've ever uploaded on my channel, where I have 30 plus methods for money making. So this will be similar, but solely focused on AFK methods, because who doesn't like low effort moneymakers? So I'll link that video in the description, and this video will have timestamps and basically a glossary in the description for you to skip to whatever section you want. I'll be showing low level, mid level, and high level methods. I tried to keep the high level methods very high because a lot of people tend to classify mid level methods as high level methods, and I've even made that mistake before, but most of these high level methods are going to be top tier requirements, and then mid will be everything in between, and then we all know what low level methods are. So hopefully this can be your one-stop shop for all AFK moneymakers. I spent a lot of time editing this entire video together, creating most of these methods from scratch and doing new voiceovers, so if this helped you out at all, I'd appreciate a like very much, and thank you so much for watching. So let's get into this now. So this first method is going to be a very nice AFK low-level method, and it'll be making clockwork. You'll be using your player-owned house, and you'll need, for this method, level 25 construction to be able to have a crafting table 2 in your house. You'll also want 8 crafting so you can actually make the clockwork, and I would also recommend around 500k in starting cash. So for this method, all you'll need to do is bring house teleports and an inventory full of steel bars. What you will do is you'll go and you'll teleport to your house, and you'll go to your crafting bench. Then all you need to do is click Make Clockwork, and then you can AFK for around 2 minutes while you make the clockwork, which is really nice. Then after you're done and all your clockwork is made, you'll want to teleport out to a bank. I personally used a Ring of Dueling to teleport for Castle Wars, as this is really easy to get access to as a low level. Then what you'll want to do is rebank and teleport back to your house, and just repeat this method and continue making clockwork and banking. It's honestly so easy and super AFK, and it's also super nice for the requirements. I love that I found such an AFK method for lower levels that really doesn't require much. Now we're going to look at how much money this method is per hour. So I ended up buying 100 steel bars to turn into clockwork, and it only took me 5 minutes to finish all the steel bars. This comes out to So making the clockwork for a full hour, you can expect to make around 800 to 850 clockwork every hour, depending on your banking time. Now these clockwork did cost me 800 steel bars to make, which is around 800k GP. But when we sell the clockwork, they actually all end up instant selling for 3.6 mil for all 800, which is a 2.8 million GP profit in 1 hour without much effort at very low requirements. So all around, this is a really great method, especially for people with lower stats or starting a new account and wanting to make some good starting cash for PVM or to get their skills up. Make sure you check the price of the clockwork first and make sure that it actually sells. But every time I've done this method, the clockwork ends up instant selling, so it seems to be pretty stable and a really decent thing to do at a low level. Alright, so this next method is going to be making Sophanem Slayer Dungeon teleports in your player-owned house using a lectern and then selling them on the GE. It's a very simple and really nice AFK method that low levels can do. Alright, now for this method you'll need a level 40 construction and a lectern in your house. You will also need the Jack of Spades quest completed with Menaphos unlocked, and you'll also need tier 4 Menaphos reputation, and a butler also helps you unnote your soft clay in your house, but you do not need that. You can just go and bank and come back. This method is very simple. You'll first of course need a lectern, then you'll need to buy law runes and soft clay. You'll need to get 2 times the amount of law runes as you get soft clay. So for example, if you're making 1,000 tablets, you'll need 2,000 law runes and 1,000 soft clay. Now after this, you go to your player owned house and you click on your lectern and you click to make these Sophanem Slayer dungeon teleports. Now the reason we are making these in your house is because the amount of GP these go for has gone up a ton recently. They're used a lot for clue scrolls to navigate easily and also to easily get to the dungeon for Slayer. When you make these, you can basically AFK a full inventory for like 2 minutes, which is super nice. If you have a butler, you can just click and unnote your clay and go basically back to making them. You can also go to a bank yourself and just come back to your house, which is also super simple too, so you don't need a butler, and the method is honestly just super chill. So now we're going to go see how much money we made during this method. Alright, so doing this method, we ended up spending around 1.3 million GP in supplies for a full hour of making these, and in total we got almost 900 tablets, which ended up selling after around 15 minutes or so in the GE for 5k each, which made us a profit of 3.2 million in 1 hour. And if you left these tablets in and were patient, unlike me, for a higher price like 6k, which is their medium price, you could probably make upwards of 4 mil an hour with this method. So it's a really nice method that most people can do once they have the Menaphos reputation, and it requires very little skill levels. Alright, so this next method is going to be very low requirements, and this method will be excavating third age iron at the Archaeology campus, and it's a very AFK type method that you're going to be able to basically click and just sit around for a good amount of time and then click again. So for this method, as in requirements, you'll need at least level 5 Archaeology and have completed the Archaeology tutorial, which is very easy to do. You'll also want to make sure that you have the best Matic you can use, and that is basically it. Those are all of the requirements. So now that we know the requirements and those are out of the way, we're going to look at how you can actually do this method. So you want to go to the Archaeology campus, which is located near the dig site, and it's where that you first start Archaeology and do the tutorial and everything like that. So you want to go there, and then near the Archaeology tutorial guy there will be 3 material caches, and these have third age iron in them. You'll then just want to excavate the third age iron. This method I honestly really like. It's super AFK, you don't have to pay much attention at all, and it will take you around, I think, 5 to 6 minutes to get a full inventory of third age iron. Now this obviously goes slower or faster depending on your Archaeology level and what tier of Matic you have. And then when you have a full inventory of this third age iron, it's very easy. You can just go and bank west of this area very quickly, bank all your stuff, and then just run back to the third age iron and start excavating again. Super simple and super low requirements. So now that we looked at the requirements and how to do this method, we're going to now look at the GP per hour you can expect to make here. So in 1 hour, you can expect around 250 to 350 third age iron, depending, like I said, on your Archaeology level or your Matic. So I ended up getting 336 third age iron, and I ended up selling it instantly for 1.6 mil. I would say this method is very easily 1.3 to 2 million GP per hour, depending on your Archaeology level, your Matic, and everything like that. It's just a nice method, and basically anyone can do it for some quick cash. So this is one that I highly recommend if you're a lower level and you need some money. Alright, so the next low-level AFK money-making method is going to be another very simple one that's going to be smithing mithril bars. Now, for this method, the requirements are pretty straightforward. You'll want level 37 smithing because at this level, you have a 10% chance to make an extra bar without using any resources. So this will really help bring the profit up, so you should definitely wait until you have level 37 smithing to start doing this method. So to basically do this method, you'll also want 1 to 2 million GP to get started. So for this method, you'll want to get coal and mithril ore. You'll need 1 coal and 1 mithril ore per bar. Then what you'll want to do for this is to go to any furnace and deposit your ores. Then you just click and start smelting some mithril bars. You basically can AFK for around a full minute and then just click once to deposit your bars and then click again to start smelting some more. It's very, very little effort and you don't really have to pay much attention at all except for a few clicks. Now this method does make a bit less than the other methods shown previously, but the requirements for this of course are very low and it's really easy to do while watching Netflix, playing on another account, or even doing it on mobile. So I really like this method as well, especially for people just looking to get jump started and make a few mil. So now that you know how to do the method, let's look at how much profit we make during this and how much you can expect to make in a full hour. So in the full hour, you'll end up making around 2,200 mithril bars on average, which instant sold for me in the GE for 2.2 mil. This means if we subtract our 1.4 million GP in supplies, this comes out to a little over 800k GP that we made in the hour. Now I could have maybe been a little bit more patient and raised the price of these bars to like 1,100 each and waited, but overall you're looking at a decent profit of like 750k to 1 mil per hour, depending on the price that you sell these for and how much you spend on your supplies. So while not the most amazing in money, it is pretty AFK, you'll get some smithing XP, and it's all around not a bad method for someone looking to make a little cash as a low level. Alright, so our next method is going to be a combat method, and it'll be killing Seeker Slayer creatures in the Stalker dungeon AFK with Revolution++. Now the requirements for this method are level 71 Slayer and the Dishonor Among Thieves quest complete. You'll need the Oldak Coil, which is highly recommended, as well as Devotion is also highly recommended, and then I recommend around 80 combat stats. So let's get into the equipment setup and the inventory setup first. So for gear, this is the gear I'm using, however you should just bring your normal range Slayer gear. I'd say at minimum tier 70 armor and tier 80 weapons. Now notable items that you can bring to help are the Blood Amulet of Fury for some healing, Cinderbane Gauntlets if you have them since these monsters are poisonable. I was using the Scripture of Wen, but you can use whatever pocket slot you want, but it's pretty decent for AoE and cheap. As for the inventory, bringing an Ancient Elven Ritual Shard and Enhanced Excalibur can help you maintain prayer and health easier for cheaper. Oldak Coil and Cannonballs are very, very strong here and super good, as well as Weapon Poison and Overloads as your potions. Then I would advise bringing a bit more prayer than I did here. As for food, I brought a little bit, but I actually never ended up needing to eat any food at all, and I was pretty much always near max health, so I'd just bring a bit more prayer. You should always be kind of close to max health because we're going to be using the Vampirism Aura. This is extremely important, so make sure you have your Vampirism Aura activated when doing this method as well. Also, the communication device gotten during the Dishonor Among Thieves quest can teleport you right here very fast to the Stalker dungeon, so I brought that too. As for your Revolution bar, you'll want to basically have a bunch of AoE abilities. You don't need Greater Ricochet like I have, just replace it with normal Ricochet, and then having Devotion at the front of your bar so it's constantly being used is very, very good, as well as having Sacrifice on your bar for heals is really going to help you just take very little damage. You can also put Death Swiftness at the start of your bar too. The bar I'm using is by no means optimal, but I was easily able to AFK, walk away from my screen, and maintain pretty much full health. Alright, so for doing this method, you'll want to just go to the Stalker dungeon, drink up your overloads and weapon poison, activate your Vampirism Aura, put down your Oldak Coil and fill it up with cannonballs, turn on your Auto Retaliate, take out your legendary pet if you do have one. It can make it easier to pick up the common drops, but of course you don't need it. Make sure you put on your Protect from Magic and then just AFK. I had my loot beam set to 100k and I would basically pick up anything that beamed. These drop a lot of rare drop table drops, so you'll be getting a lot of those as well. You can pick up all the loot, but since I wanted to make this even more AFK, I basically only picked up the Seeker Charms, which is the main drop that we're going to be killing these for, and any rare drop table drops that I got I also picked up, and I was basically able to AFK and like go to the bathroom in the middle of this, come back at basically full health. The only times that you'll actually have to pay attention is to glance back to see if if you got any drops or to drink prayer. So now we're going to go take a look at some of the loot. Alright, so this was my loot from 30 minutes of AFKing the Seekers. Now keep in mind, I did not pick up any of the normal drops. I tried to be as AFK as possible, so I only picked up the rare table drops or the Seeker charms, and this was super AFK. And as you can see, in 30 minutes of AFKing these, we made 5.5 mil, which is like 11 mil GP per hour. Now I would say this method is probably around the 8 to 10 mil per hour AFK. You can maybe get a little more money if you have a legendary pet picking up the normal drops, but this has become one of my favorite methods and I highly recommend you try it out if you have the stats. My charms did end up selling after a little bit in the GE for 225k each. So the first method we're going to be looking at is AFKing Chaos Dwarves and Hand Cannoners with aggression potions. To do this method, the requirements are going to be 80 plus combat stats, 92 prayer for soul split. You will need a split tooth dragon necklace or a twisted bird skull necklace, any of the necklaces that work with the bone crusher. Speaking on bone crusher, you'll also need the bone crusher, of course, and you will need the forgiveness of a chaos dwarf quest complete to be able to access the chaos battlefield. For the gear setup, you're going to want some non-degradable armor and possibly a weapon if you can. But you could use something that degrades like a noxious staff if you don't mind spending a little more money like I did, but you could use something that doesn't degrade as well to save money. So I use full subjugation since it won't degrade, and then a noxious staff. You're going to need a bone crusher of course and a split tooth dragon necklace combination, as this is key to this method to not using any prayer. A luck ring is also nice to use along with a rune pouch since we'll be maging. And any cape is honestly fine for this method. You're not going to be having to deal out a ton of damage. It's more of just having at least something on and being able to AoE things down. So for the inventory, it's pretty simple. You'll just want aggression potions, and you can use overloads or stat boosting potions to speed things up a little bit, but you don't have to. I just did because I basically bring them everywhere. I brought some panic food, although after doing this method for a whole hour, I didn't use any food or prayer at all, so you really don't need any extra food or prayer unless you're scared. But I wouldn't be. It was really easy. Magic notepaper is also a very good thing to bring because these monsters drop a lot of muddy keys that are worth about 10k each, and you can pick them up and note them for some extra cash per hour if you do, although of course you can just leave them on the ground if you don't want to waste the time picking them up. So before we get into this method, I just want to say I'll be using an Alt-1 toolkit during this method, which is a Runescape overlay, and it has something called the AFK Warden, and what this does is it will give you a notification whenever you get a loot beam. So if you're AFKing and you hear the notification sound, you know you have a loot beam and you know to look back at your screen to pick up items. This is great for this method because you can literally just look away for the whole 6 minutes of your aggression potion and then AFK after taking another sip. I'll leave a link in the description to this overlay as it's completely safe and not against the rules, and most people have been using it for years on RuneScape 3 for things like clues and puzzle boxes. You do not need this, however, as you can just look back every now and then to see if you have a loot beam, but it's something that I like to use. So the Chaos Dwarves and Hand Cannoners drop notably hand cannons, hand cannon shots, muddy keys, and the coveted dragon pickaxe. Picking up the hand cannon shots and muddy keys are optional. It'll make things a tad less bit AFK, but you'll make more money per hour. And now with the new area loot that's updated, you can keep area loot up at all times and just walk around every now and then and pick up all the keys. However, the main drops we're going to be going for are the hand cannon and the dragon pickaxe. So to do this method, you'll need to just get to the Chaos Dwarf battlefield, which is in the southwest corner of Keldegrim by a tunnel near the Gold Rock. Once you're here, it's really simple. You'll want to stand around where I'm standing near the white Chaos Drogers and Hand Cannoners, which are what we'll be wanting to kill because the black guard members don't drop anything that we're after. So you'll want to position yourself near the west side of the battlefield. Then you'll want to put on Soul Split, and I wouldn't recommend using any Mage Turmoils because it's really not worth it. You'll want to drink your aggression pot and stat boosting potions if you have them, and make sure your AoE abilities are on your bar, such as Chain, Dragon Breath, and Corruption Shot, so things like that are really going to help speed up the kills. Now you'll just AFK, and every now and then you'll check back for loot beams, and you should always have full prayer and health. Now if you find yourself getting low on health for any reason, you can use a Vampirism Aura as a nice little crutch and should have no issues. It's honestly way more AFK than I thought from doing this previously. When I did this before, I used to pay full attention killing the right dwarves, but honestly, this is just such a great AFK method, and you don't need to have super high level gear or insanely high stats. So now we're going to look at the loot I received and look at the GP per hour on average. So I ended up doing this for a full hour, and I ended up getting 430 hand cannoner kills, 350 chaos dwarf kills, and 260 chaos droger kills in the full hour for a total of 1,000 kills completely AFK. I ended up getting 5 hand cannons, which is about on rate for how many hand cannoners I killed. Maybe I got a tad a bit lucky. And in total, I made over 4 million in the hour. However, this does not factor in the dragon pickaxe, which I ended up getting 1k kills of the monsters that dropped the dragon pickaxe. And the dragon pickaxe is a 1 in 5k drop. So I basically should have gotten 1/5 of a dragon pickaxe this hour, which adds up to like another 2.5 mil. I did, however, pick up the muddy keys and use magic notepaper, which got me an extra 600 or 700k, which is pretty nice. So I would say this method, completely AFK, is a good 3 to 6 million GP per hour. If you include the dragon pickaxe chance, you may even be able to get like 7 to 8 mil an hour if you're picking up all the muddy keys and stuff. And it's honestly just such a good method to AFK. There's not much startup cost, not huge requirements, and it's just really nice. So I highly recommend this to anyone with the stats. And hand cannons and dragon pickaxes are always going to be like a decent amount because people disassemble the hand cannons and people use the dragon pickaxes. So I don't see the items going down very much. So this is a really, really good AFK method. So now moving on to the next method, we are going to be looking at mining Necrite rocks for Necrite Ore. The requirements for this method are going to be level 70 mining, and then you'll need 83 summoning for a lava titan. And 99 strength will give you better rates per hour, however, it's not needed. So for the gear setup, I would recommend the best mining outfit you have, although of course you don't need it. I'm using the Magic Golem outfit. Bring your best pickaxe, and then Grace of the Elves and Porters are really good because they'll bank the ore for you. So that's what I recommend using. However, you could use your ore box, of course. And for your inventory, you'll want a Lava Titan pouch because it's just really good. And then Necrite Stone Spirits to double your ores, which is something you'll need to buy. And then you'll also want a Perfect Juju Mining Potion to increase your stamina when mining. So in terms of location, we're going to be doing this in the Alcrid Resource Dungeon, which does require level 75 Dungeoneering to enter and has 6 Necrite rocks. However, if you don't have 75 Dungeoneering, you can go to the Uzer Mine and mine rocks there. I'll link in the description to Necrite rock locations so you can see. So once you get to your location, it's just honestly super easy. You just click on a rock and you AFK. That's pretty much it. Of course, you can go to different rocks to get the rock opportunities if you want to speed up things, but honestly, if you just want to AFK endlessly, don't even bother. This method is one of the most AFK methods I found, and it actually is pretty decent money-wise for how AFK it is. So we're now going to look at the GP per hour that I got. So if we take a look at the GP per hour, I ended up spending around 200 to 225k on the stone spirits and the porter charges that I used. And in a total of 20 minutes of AFK mining, I ended up mining 190 Necrite Ore, which including my geodes loot came out to 917k GP, which is about 700k profit in 20 minutes, or a little bit over 2 million GP per hour in an extremely AFK method, and I mean extremely AFK. This is a great method if you really want to just not pay attention at all, and it's even more AFK than our first method, and honestly just decent money for how easy it is. So this next method is going to be killing Pyrefiends for their ashes. Now this method is going to be similar to Chaos Dwarves as it's AFK, and then you need to run around and pick up stuff and then start AFKing again. This method can be made way better at a higher level, but it also works pretty well as a mid-level method, which is what I'll be showcasing here. So the requirements for this method are tier 70 plus magic weapons, 80 combat stats, 30 Slayer to actually be able to kill the Pyrefiends, Vampire Zamora, 89 Invention, and the Chroming 3 perk. Now let's talk about some of the things you need more in depth. So first, the Chroming 3 perk is very important because it will allow your chain ability to hit 3 additional targets, which is very good for how we're going to be killing these Pyrefiends all at once. You'll need 89 Invention and Shadow components unlocked to get this perk, which will end up costing you around 25 to 30 mil GP, but this perk is something that you can find use for a lot of other places, so you'll end up making your money back as well with this after a bit of time doing this method. So you can also try this method with normal AoE abilities and not having chroming, but it just won't be as much GP per hour. I'll link below shadow components, how to get them, what to disassemble, and how they're unlocked as well, so you can look at that if you don't currently have them. So next, for the gear and inventory setup, for the gear you'll want magic armor. I would say tier 70 at least, which is what I ended up using during this method. I was using subjugation. And then for weapons, I use dual wield abyssal wand and orb with Chroming 3 perk. You'll want your Chroming perk, and then you'll want tier 70 weapons or above, I'd say. As for the rest of the gear, a Blood Amulet of Fury is very nice to have, so that's something you should bring along as well. And then Vampire Zamora is very important and basically required for this method unless you have Soul Split. As for the rest of the gear, like boots, gloves, ring, cape, just fill those slots out with whatever you have available. It's not too important or too big of a deal. So for your inventory, you'll want to bring a spring cleaner. This is so you can have it break down or alch almost all the salvage and items. This is so you don't have to deal with many items on the floor, except for the ashes, which is what we want to pick up. You'll want aggression potions so the Pyrefiends stay aggressive to you, and then prayer renewal and prayer potions to keep your prayer up. I'm just using a standard air spell and then a super magic potion. Bring whatever you want. If you have overloads, you should bring those. If you don't, you can use a Vecna Skull 2 to boost your magic, or whatever stat boosting potions that you have. And then very importantly, you'll want magic note paper. This is what we're going to be using to note the ashes, and it's dirt cheap right now at like less than 200 GP each, so it's easily worth it. However, if you do happen to have 108 Archaeology and the Death Note relic, you can use this, but this is a mid-level guide, which is why I'm not including it. A herbicide is very nice as well, same with gold accumulator if you have that. Alright, so now for the actual method. You'll want to go to the Fremnik Slayer dungeon and go to the Pyrefiends in that dungeon. You want to turn on your Protect from Magic. Now if you do have Soul Split, you should 100% be using Soul Split, but like I said, this is for mid-level, so I'm assuming that you don't have Soul Split, so just use Protect from Magic and turn on Auto Retaliate and activate your Vampirism Aura, drink your Aggression Potions and your Magic Potions. As for your action bar, you'll want something like this. You'll want something that has Chain, Dragon Breath, and your Bleeds at the start, basically all your AoE abilities. These Pyrefiends die really fast, so you aren't going to need to use like a bunch of ultimates or thresholds or anything. Greater Chain is really good too, but like I said, this is for mid-levels, so I'm not going to expect you to have Greater Chain, so normal Chain works just fine. So the general idea for this method is you want to sit here and AFK for around a minute and a half, 2 minutes or so. After this, you'll get your area loot up and loot all the impious ashes and note them. Then you'll want to move over to the opposite side of the arena, pick up the ashes over there, note them, and then start AFKing again and repeat. You won't have to do much other than click a few times to pick up the ashes from the left side of the room and then from the right side of the room. If you're on mobile, your area loot will work even better for this, but honestly, this is very similar to Chaos Dwarves for me, and I found it a really nice method to do. Another thing that I want to note is if you go to your area loot options, you can change it so it prioritizes items over 5k. Since the ashes are over 5k, this will make it so they will be prioritized and your inventory won't be getting as clogged up with worthless items. This really helps make this just a lot easier. So yeah, I did this method and it was honestly pretty easy. It felt, like I said, just like Chaos Dwarves. where I would just go and AFK, and then every 2 minutes I'd go pick up all the loot, note it, and then go back to AFKing. It isn't like extremely AFK where you can AFK for 10 minutes at a time, but it is pretty decently AFK where you can make some decent money. So I ended up doing this, and we'll see how much money I made. Alright, so how much did I get from doing this method? So I basically AFK'd for around 20 minutes there, and I ended up getting a little over 400 ashes. Now, if you do have the higher tier stuff, like if you have Chroming 4, if you have Greater Chain, you can get upwards of like 1800 ashes, but again, this is mid-level guide. So with the mid-level setup with Chroming 3, you should expect around 1000 to 1200 ashes an hour. We ended up getting a little over 400 in 20 minutes. So we ended up instant selling these ashes for around 1.9 mil, and of course we did use some supplies, like the magic notepaper was around 80k or so, and then of course the aggression potions and prayer potions. So we made about 1.6 mil profit or so in 20 minutes, which comes out to around 4.8 million GP per hour. However, like I said, if you do have the higher level stuff like the Chroming 4, Greater Chain, stuff like that, you can probably expect around 6 to 7 mil an hour, but for mid-levels, I would say quite easily you can get around 4 to 5 million GP per hour doing this method, so it's one that I really like. So now we're moving on to the high-level methods. This first method is going to be using the Scavenging 4 perk to get you some really good invention components that can make you money, and also ones that are very rare to save you some money. So let's get into it now. So firstly, I'm going to go over what scavenging is and how it is used in this scenario. So scavenging is an invention perk that has the chance of producing uncommon and rare invention materials when you kill monsters that give combat XP. So basically what this perk does is it will randomly give you components when killing monsters. We are going to use this to our advantage by killing very weak monsters so we can get tons and tons of scavenging procs, and then we are going to convert our components that we get into cash to make this method into a moneymaker. So to get Scavenging, you'll want to get Scavenging 4, which is obtained by using an ancient invention gizmo. I would recommend putting it on a non-degradable piece of armor to use for this method. So the easiest way to get Scavenging 4 is to use precious components, which are easily obtained by disassembling jewelry like diamond amulets or things like that. Now, the odds of getting Scavenging 4 is about 6.5% to get some iteration of Scavenging 4. It'll cost you 9 precious components each attempt, and your chances are increased by using an extreme invention potion at level 120 invention. Now, once you have the Scavenging 4 perk, it's time to get our setup ready and start AFKing for some easy components and cash. Alright, so now that you have your Scavenging perk, we are going to be looking at the gear and inventory setup for doing this method. So for the gear setup, you basically need a wand and an orb, and more important is a wand or orb with chroming on it. The chroming perk allows you to chain your ability and kill more monsters at once, which is vital for this method. And you can get the chroming perk by using shadow components. So other than chroming, you will also need air spells, and it really doesn't matter which spells you use, so you might as well use the cheapest air spell that you can. Luck of the Dwarves or any luck ring is fine, but it's not really needed. And then for armor, you really won't need any, since the things we are killing only have 150 HP and will easily die in one hit no matter what armor you use. But make sure you are using at least some sort of non-degradable armor that has your Scavenging perk on it. As for your inventory setup, we will be making use of the aggression potion to make corpse spiders constantly attack us, which will allow us to AFK for a full 6 minutes at once. You will also want to have a Smoke Devil Familiar with Dust Cloud special attack scrolls. Now the reason you'll want this familiar and these scrolls is because the Smoke Devil Familiar uses a Dust Cloud special attack that will deal 791 magic damage on up to 6 random enemies. So it's kind of like using a Chinchompa or Ice Barrage attack. You will want to set your auto fire rate to 1 on your familiar, so then your Smoke Devil Familiar will constantly cast this as much as it can, and it will make it very easy to AoE a ton of the corpse spiders down. A Spring Cleaner is also an optional thing to bring if you want to break down some of the cheaper drops, but it's not really needed. So to do this method, all you'll want to do is go to Lumbridge and go to the Catacombs, and you'll want to go to the Corpse Spiders. Once you're at the Corpse Spiders, you'll want to set up your ability bar like this. You'll want your ability bar to have Chain, Dragon's Breath, and Corruption Blast at the front with Revolution on. This will make it so that you're constantly using AoEs and getting as many kills as possible per hour. Make sure you turn your Auto Retaliate on, and then once you're here, you'll drink your Aggression Potion, and then you'll basically just AFK. You don't need to worry about prayer, you don't need to worry about food or dying. The only thing that you may want to keep an eye out for is if you get an unchecked spider egg drop, because these are possible to be dropped from corpse spiders and they'll add a little bit of money to your profit. This method is honestly just so nice and super AFK. You can literally just click on your aggression pot, turn Auto Retaliate on, and AFK for a full 6 minutes. It's one of the most AFK combat methods I've ever done, and you really don't need to pay attention to anything as you won't really get any loot or have any chance of dying. I'd say this method is super good if you're looking for something to AFK on mobile, because you really won't need to pay that much attention at all, and it's honestly probably really good if you're just AFKing in general, maybe watching a movie, you know, basically whatever. You can get up. I got up and left my computer screen, went downstairs, got a snack, came back up, and I was still there just killing corpse spiders. So it's really, really nice, and not to mention you'll get some good components and money. So now we're going to look at what components I got in an hour, and then look at how to convert these components into GP. Alright, so after an hour of killing the corpse spiders, I actually got quite a bit of components and surprisingly lucky on the spider egg drops. So the main items you're going to want to make to convert your components into cash is firstly, mechanized chinchompas. Now, the main components you're going to be getting through scavenging is the living components. You will actually get living components faster through scavenging than you do even disassembling. So in the hour, I ended up getting 30 living components, which meant I could make 300 mechanized chinchompas. The other component needed for mechanized chinchompas are very common, so you probably have a lot of them already, and if you don't, they end up only being about 500 GP to 1k each, so it won't cut into your profit too much at all if you have to disassemble for them. Chinchompas and living components are definitely going to be a big chunk of your money gained while you use this method. After this, I ended up making equipment siphons, which require most notably precious components, which I ended up getting 50 precious components during the hour of corpse spiders. Dexterous components are also required, which I had a lot of already, but I did end up getting a decent amount of them as well during the hour. This is also going to be one of the main methods and main things you'll be able to make while doing this method, and you'll be able to use your components and cash them out on equipment siphons. So finally, the last item is I ended up making augmenters, which most notably you'll get powerful and enhancing components while killing corpse spiders, and I ended up being able to make 5 augmenters, which is not too shabby for an hour spent. Of course, you will need some of the common components, but I already had them, and the main components that you will be needing that are expensive is the powerful components, which you should get a lot from scavenging. So after the full hour, I ended up being able to make 5 augmenters, 300 mechanized chins, and 10 equipment siphons. Alright, so our next high level method is going to be a guide on how to essentially AFK Gregorovic, which got even more AFK with the new penance powder that was just released with Headless Oasis. The PvMe Discord has a great guide on this as well if you're interested in ranging Gregorovic while AFK too. I'm going to be using melee in this one with the new penance powder to make this a super safe method. I'll link the PvMe below, as Frank does a great job with these AFK guides, and this guide is similar to the melee AFK guide but with a few different tweaks for a more AFK experience. So this is a high level method that will require a lot of stuff that we'll go through in a minute, but first, in terms of stats, I would recommend 99 combat stats. If you're doing such a high level method like this and have this type of gear, you should have max combat. Also 96 prayer for soul split and turmoils, 73 summoning because we'll be using the blood reaver familiar, along with 96 herblore for overloads. And then you'll want an adrenaline urn or the persistent rage relic, which is very important. And then you need to have some very specific gear or this method won't be nearly as good or AFK, so we'll get into that now. So for the gear, you'll need trimmed masterwork armor and an essence of finality. I think you could get by with an amulet of souls, but you'll need at least that. A tier 92 trimmed masterwork spear of annihilation is very good and what I'll be using in this guide, and it allows this to be a very safe method, but Lanakia's spear can work as well. It just might get a little more risky at times and you might have to tweak your action bar. Cinderbane gloves are 100% needed for poison stacking, along with a ring of death, or you can replace this with your best ring. The ring isn't too important. Then you'll want your best melee cape like the Igneous Call, the Kiln Cape, or a Max Cape. Then you will need the Vampirism Scrimshaw, and the Vampirism Aura is highly recommended. This is what we'll be using to maintain our health and make this a super AFK experience. So now we're going to move on to a very important section of this money making method, and that is the inventory and buffs you're going to need. So you're going to need a few things. The first is the new penance powder. This is very important as it basically allows you to use Vampirism Scrimshaw and Aura and also have basically unlimited prayer. Before this was impossible, you'd have to either bring more prayer potions, which would make this less AFK because you'd have to worry about your prayer, or you'd have to bring the penance aura, but then you couldn't use the vampirism aura, which made it a bit more risky. But now we can afford to use the vampirism aura, the vampirism scrimshaw, and have the penance powder to maintain our prayer. So next, like I mentioned, you will need the Vampirism Aura and Scrimshaw. You'll need the Blood Reaver Familiar, which is going to be coupled with the Cinderblade gloves and all our poison damage, like the Weapon Poison Potion and the Quorum Incense Sticks to give us maximum poison damage. And then the Blood Reaver will damage based on the health that we heal, which will be a lot from our Scrimshaw and Aura. And this will also be coupled with the Cinderbane gloves to deal more hit splats, and it'll keep our health very high, making this much more AFK. Then you will also need Irit Incense Sticks or the Venom Blood perk. The reason you'll need these is one or the other, so you can have a way to avoid Greg's poison. Now for the inventory setup, it's very simple. Just bring overloads and your weapon poison, a few prayer potions just in case, but honestly I didn't drink a single dose, I don't think. You'll want an adrenaline urn or persistent rage relic, something to keep your adrenaline installed so you can AFK. An enhanced Excalibur and an ancient elven ritual shard is also nice, more so the Excalibur as you probably won't need the shard that much. A spring cleaner and potion reservoir can make this even more AFK if you want to put your overloads in the reservoir. Now for the ability bar, this is what I recommend using. Since you're using the Masterwork Spear, you'll want to prioritize your bleeds, and of course you also have Debilitate to reduce damage taken. And then if you're still taking too much damage, something that kind of helps is you can move your sacrifice up closer to the start of your bar so that goes off more often. But to do this method, it's really simple. Just go to Greg and make sure you have everything enabled. Double check because of course there's a lot. You need Soul Split, your Turmoil, your Penance Powder, your Vampirism Aura, your Vampirism Scrimshaw, your Weapon Poison, both of your Incense Sticks, and make sure your Auto Retaliate is on, and then basically just AFK. This method is honestly so much more AFK than I thought was possible. Keep in mind, usually you'd be sipping prayer a lot if you're using both the Vampirism, Scrimshaw, and Aura, because you didn't have any prayer restoration really, but the penance powder is so overpowered and allows for such a chill experience. I was getting around 1 minute kills, and you can reasonably expect about 40 kills an hour AFK doing this method. So I AFK'd for a full hour, and I don't think I was barely ever below half health even once. It was just super overpowered and probably one of the most AFK methods on this guide, and that's crazy seeing as this is a boss too. So in terms of the GP per hour that you can expect here, doing 40 kills per hour via the RuneScape Wiki's loot calculator, you can expect around 18 million GP in loot in the long run, which we probably use a good 2 or 3 mil in supplies, so I'd guess it comes out to around 14 to 15 mil GP per hour, completely AFK, which is absolutely amazing. Honestly, I feel myself like this is something personally that I'm going to do until I have the entire Greg log, because as I AFK'd Greg, I was basically editing this video and I rarely had to look except to re-overload or weapon poison or pick up loot. It was just super nice. So this method is one that I can honestly recommend to a lot of people, especially now with the penance powder. If you have this gear and these stats, this can be a great way to, AFK and make 15-20 mil an hour, basically just not paying much attention at all, and at the same time you'll be filling out your Gregorovic log. Maybe you'll get the pet. I'm definitely gonna grind this like I said, and yeah, Greg AFK is super good now. This penance powder, it just really makes things overpowered now. I'm curious to see if they keep it how it is. But again, if any of these methods are outdated in the future during this guide, I will make sure to write in the pinned comment which ones are now outdated or update the GP per hour. So the next high level method for this ultimate money making guide is going to be fletching elder arrow shafts and then making them into headless elder arrows. Now this method requires only level 90 fletching. As for gear and inventory, you don't need much. Fletching cape perk is nice, but it's not needed and it won't make a huge difference. Basically, you'll just want to buy elder logs and feathers off the Grand Exchange for this method. After this, you'll basically just want to AFK while you craft your logs into arrow shafts. This lets you AFK for around a minute before you need to bank and get out more logs. Then after you fletch them all into arrow shafts, you'll then need to tip them with the feathers to make elder headless arrows. This is just as AFK, if not a little bit more AFK than crafting the shafts, since you don't have to actually bank. Just use your feathers on the arrows and AFK for a little over a minute and repeat. Very easy and very straightforward as a method. So we ended up spending around 4.6 mil on all the elder logs and feathers, and then in total for our elder headless arrows we got 6.24 mil worth, which comes out to a decent profit of around 1.6 million GP, and this took us around 25 minutes, so this method is pretty comfortably 3.5 to 4 million GP per hour. And all the arrows actually ended up instant selling for even more than the price showed, so we did make a little bit extra. So I would say, yeah, pretty much 4 mil an hour, maybe a little bit more, depending on if you want to wait for them to sell. You could maybe get even more for them. Is excavating artifacts, disassembling them to turn them into historic and classic components, and finally make those into crates and sell for profit on the GE. For this method, you will only need level 5 Archaeology, but to make this any good, you will want at least level 80 to 90. You'll also need 20 Invention. I recommend having an Elder Rune Matic or Imcondo Matic fully perked out. This method gets better based on the Archaeology gear and upgrades you have, so the higher Archaeology level you are and the more Archaeology upgrades that you have, the better this method will be. For my gear setup for this method, I am using the full Archaeology outfit, although the Master outfit is by far the best. I am also using an Imcondo Matic with Fortune 3 and Hone 6. You should use the best Matic that you have. I am also using Grace of the Elves with Signs of the Porters to bank materials. And then I also have Luck of the Dwarves, but this can be replaced with the Ring of Whispers. As for my inventory, I just have the auto sifter, which is super nice for turning your soil into materials, and then your porters will just bank them instantly. However, you can bring a soil box and just bank the soil when it's full. The Water Fiend pouch is also very good because we will be extracting so many artifacts that the Water Fiend pouch will make it so there is a chance that the Water Fiend can double them for you. So it's really good to bring. So to start off this method, you'll want to go to the Kree'ara dig site, which is the first dig site you ever unlock. And you'll want to go to the first excavation site that you unlock, which only requires level 5 archaeology, the Venator Remains. What you'll want to do is just excavate these remains for artifacts. If you're level 90 archaeology, like I mentioned, you should easily get these super fast. Now, this method can be as AFK or click intensive as you want. The more click intensive it is, meaning you follow the time sprite around, the more artifacts and more money you'll make per hour. However, if you are AFK, you can still make a good amount of money per hour as well and just not follow the time sprite. So you'll just want to keep excavating remains, and when you have a full inventory of artifacts, just bank them at the bank chest nearby and keep repeating. It's really super simple. So now, once you've spent a bit of time collecting all your artifacts, it's now time to restore them. I will link a calculator in the description table below with all the materials you need to restore your artifacts. And you also will have collected some from excavating, so make sure that you keep that in mind. But you will also need to buy some, which we'll do now, and we'll factor the cost into the end profit. So now you'll just want to restore your artifacts, and then after you're done restoring them, you'll want to disassemble them for classic and historic components. After this, you'll want to go to an invention workbench and basically make these into crates of components. Now you may need some padded components, which are pretty simple to get, and most of you probably have them, but if not, you can disassemble something like green d'hide bodies, which may cost a tiny little bit, but honestly not too much, and you can use this to make historic crates and classic crates. So in total, I spent around 30 minutes excavating artifacts and then 5 minutes restoring them. I got a total of 1,000 historic components and 20 classic components. The classic components came out to around 480k for the 20, and then I sold a historic large crate that I made for 6.2 mil. This came out to 6.7 million GP in 35 minutes. However, we did spend around 2.3 million GP on supplies, which means our profits in 35 minutes was 4.3 million GP, or around 7.5 mil an hour. I can see this method making you about 5 million GP per hour while you're AFK, all the way up to 8 or 9 mil per hour if you're focusing on the time sprite and have all the good gear. If you have the archaeology levels, this is a solid AFK money making method and can be extremely AFK when not following the time sprite, and I highly recommend you try it out. Alright, so the next high level method on the ultimate AFK money making guide is going to be AFKing Corporeal Beast. Now we talked about Gregorovic earlier, but Corporeal Beast is really good for money as well. So for this method, the required stats that you'll need are 90 plus combat stats, 95 prayer for soul split and turmoil, 96 herblore so you can use overloads, the vampirism aura unlocked, and then also an adrenaline urn or the persistent rage relic. And then also I need to mention the old at coil unlocked is very important as well. So now we're going to talk about the gear setups. Now this setup is kind of specific, but there's certain things you can substitute if needed. So first we have trimmed masterwork armor, which we are wearing 4 pieces of it, and then also an essence of finality. You could maybe get by with an amulet of souls, but this might cause you to splash a bit more, thus making you not be able to sustain health as well, so you'll have to test that out. The trimmed masterwork spear of annihilation is what we will be using. However, you could try to get by with a Mizuari or Superior Vesta Spear or a tier 90 normal Spear of Annihilation, but it might be a little more difficult for you to sustain health. You'll also want to bring Cinderbane gloves since Corp is poisonable, and a melee cape or max cape or whatever you have that gives you the best bonuses for melee. It doesn't really matter too much. The Vampirism, Scrimshaw, and Aura are also required for this method as it allows you to easily sustain health. And then I'm going to be using the Champion's Ring for a buff against blood enemies, but you don't need this. You can use like a Ring of Death, Ring of Vigor, or whatever ring you have. Now moving on to the inventory and special buffs, I'll be going over the most important items to use during this method and then over the inventory itself. So for the items and buffs, you'll want to make sure you use the brand new Penance Powder, which just came out recently. This powder allows you to gain more prayer points while using it without needing to use the Penance Aura, which is very, very important to help make this method super AFK. And then you'll also want Quorum Incense Sticks for the increased poison damage buff, along with a weapon poison potion. Also, the Oldak Coil and Cannonballs are must needed to kill the core and make Corp much more AFK. An Adrenaline Urn or Persistent Rage Relic is super useful again for increasing how AFK this method is and keeping our adrenaline sustained at all times. Then the Vampirism Scrimshaw and Aura combo is going to help us heal a ton and sustain our health and allow us to AFK much easier. Alright, so as for our inventory setup, you'll want to, of course, have overloads and weapon poison, your penance powder, and then also your incense sticks. I'd bring a prayer renewal as well as some super restores. You won't need to use a ton of prayer during this because of the penance powder, but you will occasionally need to take a sip or two, although not nearly as much as if you didn't have the powder. You'll also want to bring a few panic foods, although I don't think I ate once during the AFK hour, and then the enhanced Excalibur as well is nice for sustaining some health, and then Oldak Coil and Cannonballs, and then an Adrenaline Urn if you don't have Persistent Rage, and then you can bring a Spring Cleaner to break down some of the drops if you liked, but it's a really simple inventory, and just make sure you have those important buffs and you should be good to go. So as for our ability bar, we're going to be using Revolution++, and then our ability bar, we're going to want to have thresholds like Hurricane and Quake up front because they're AoE, they can take out the core and just all around deal good damage. And then we have some AoE basics, and of course you're going to want bleeds like Dismember and Tendrils if you're using the Masterwork Spear of Annihilation, because this is going to, you know, help increase bleed damage, along with the Champion's Ring is going to make this really nice. If you aren't using the Masterwork Spear of Annihilation, you can put some more thresholds up closer, or put some more just general AoE abilities. Then we have Assault, and then Debilitate on your bar is also important. The use of Debilitate and Sacrifice together, because this is going to help you basically negate some damage with Debilitate, and then you can use Sacrifice for some heals as well. And then at the end of the bar we have Slaughter and then a few basics. So a pretty simple bar that I used in this video, and I'll show you how everything went now. So basically, to start off, you want to, of course, go to Corp, and you want to place your Oldak Coil where I place it. As you can see, I go to the middle, take a few steps, and then place it down. This is so when Corp spawns, he will come and attack you, and then basically the core will be in a right spot to be killed by the Oldak Coil, if you don't end up killing the core yourself using just AoE abilities. But make sure you have your Vampirism Scrimshaw on, your Vampirism Aura, make sure you have the Penance Powder, and then Overload up and Weapon Poison up, Soul Split on, Turmoil's on, make sure you have your Adrenaline Urn activated, or of course your Persistent Rage if you're using that instead, turn on Auto Retaliate, and then basically AFK. You can also bring a Legendary Pet if you'd like to pick up some of the loot for you. Do not bring a Familiar because Corp will eat your Familiar, so Familiars are useless here, so do not bring like a Ripper Demon or a Yak or anything. It won't do you any good. You can also bring a Potion Reservoir if you'd like to basically allow you to overload without having to, you know, look at the screen. So you can AFK actually for quite a while using this method. It is very, very AFK, just like the Greg method. The only reason you'll really have to look back is sometimes you may have to sip a dose of prayer. The reason that you might have to sip prayer is because basically when Corp is dead, it takes a little bit for for him to spawn, even if you're on the fastest instance. So you'll be sitting there with Soul Split and Turmoil on, which will drain your prayer while you're not being damaged by Corp, thus your penance powder cannot heal you up. But if you have a prayer renewal, I think maybe in the hour I drank like 3 or 4 doses of prayer, so it's not like you're gonna have to be chugging prayer potions. Again, you would if you didn't have the penance powder, or you'd have to use the penance aura, but this penance powder is just so good. So yeah, the hour for me went really smooth, and I think I'll be back here as well as Greg to AFK to try to get the Corp log done, because that's one that I don't have either. And Corp can drop some really good things, like Onyx bolts really add up, and then of course you have the sigils, which some of them actually go for a decent amount, like the Elysian and the Divine I think go for like 20-30 mil, which is not too bad. And then of course the normal drops also add up. So now we're gonna look at the loot that we can expect, and we get around, I was getting around, I think my fastest kill was like 34 seconds. I was getting some that were like 40. I would say around 40 seconds is the average. I would say you can expect around 60 plus kills an hour, so we're gonna look at the loot based on that. So based on 60 kills an hour, basically mostly on the normal loot, you can expect around 8 million GP per hour with this many kills per hour. However, keep in mind this is using the Wiki's drop calculator, and they have vastly underestimated the price of Divine Sigils, Elysian Sigils. So you'll be looking at a little bit more, but these are pretty rare, of course. They're like 1 in 2,000, so the sigils are really rare. But I would say around 9 to 10 mil an hour. We'll just say 8 to 10 mil to be safe. Now, of course, you are using the Scrimshaw of Vampirism and a few other, supplies like overloads and stuff like that. I'd say you'd be spending around 1 to 1.5 million GP per hour in terms of supplies. You're not going to be eating a bunch of food or brews or anything like that. So I would say you're probably looking at around 7 to 8 mil GP per hour AFK here at Corp with this method and 60 kills an hour. So honestly, not bad. It's a really chill boss, and I recommend it to everyone. So the next method is going to be flipping. Now this is something that varies a lot in GP per hour, but it is essentially AFK because you really don't have to spend much time at all doing it. You put in offers in the GE, wait for them to buy, go do other things, and it's something you can spend a few minutes each day doing and make some money. So that's why it's part of this guide, but it's part of the high level methods just because to make a decent amount of money flipping, you are going to need some starting cash. 100 mil, 50 mil, somewhere in there is really good. I mean, you can flip with less, but it's much harder and the margins are much slimmer. So flipping with something like 50 mil or 100 mil is going to make you more, which is why this is at the higher level methods. So I'm going to show you a flipping guide and how to basically flip. So to start off, what exactly is flipping? Well, flipping is the action of buying items for a cheaper price and then flipping them or selling them for higher on the Grand Exchange. Now, flipping has a few different ways that you can go about it, and the first thing is we're going to go over the basics. So the first thing you need to know about flipping is how to check the margins of an item. So what is a margin? Well, a margin is the margin between when you instantly buy something and you instantly sell it. If you instantly buy something on the Grand Exchange, you want it very fast. This means you're paying the top price for it. If you instantly sell something, you want to get rid of it fast. This means you're selling it for a bit cheaper. What we want to do is find items with a big difference between these two price points and buy them for the lower one and sell them for the higher one. So here's an example of all this. So now we're going to show an example of actually how to find a margin of an item. So you obviously need to think of items that you think could be a good flip. There's a variety of different ways to think of these, which we'll go into in a bit. But first, I'm just going to show you the basics of finding a margin. So we'll do a random item like a Ripper Demon Pouch. How about? So if we look up Ripper Demon Binding Contract, it's 100K. So first, we're basically going to instantly buy it for over the price, raise it 10% or so. So this instantly bought for 100K and 659 GP. This is going to be the price that you're going to sell this item for when you're flipping it. So this is what you will put in the item for once you get them. But now we want to see what the margin is and what we want to buy this for. So if we drop it, we'll drop it really low and instantly sell it. Then we get 96K, 206 GP. So between that is a 4K or so difference. So that is the margin. So if we bought 100 Ripper pouches for 96k each, and then sold 100 Ripper pouches for 100k each, that would be a 400k profit. So that is our margin. So basically now what we would do if you wanted to flip this is you would look up Ripper Demon pouch and you would put in an offer. So this was the price that it instantly sold for, but somebody is already there buying those for this price. So we want to make our offer go through, and it won't if we do this exact price. So we're going to raise it a little bit of GP up. And this is called, you know, overcutting somebody. You can undercut people. So we'll just do like 20 here as an example. So as you can see, we have these in there, and then we put our offer and we wait for them to buy. So once these actually bought, what we would do is we would take them out and we would put them in for that offer we saw before, the 100k. That is what we instantly bought it for, and sell it for that. And that is essentially, at the simplest terms, how you flip items. Now, keep in mind, there's lots of different items you can flip. So for instance, something like a Ripper pouch, you have to look at the buy limit. So per 4 hours, you can buy 5,000 of these. So that means if we bought 5,000 of these for the price that we talked about earlier, we would spend 481 mil. And then if we sold them for the 100k or so that the price was, that's 500 mil, that's a 19 mil profit. Now, here's the thing. A lot of times with items like this, supplies, they take a bit longer to buy because you're buying so many, and they change very frequently because so many people are buying and selling them. So normally what would happen here is I'd probably put in the offer for 5,000 of these. I'd probably maybe get a few hundred, and then by the time I bought 300 of these, somebody would have put in a price higher than me and I would have been overcut. Then my offer would stop filling. So then you have two choices. You can raise the price on your offer even more, but then you're shrinking the margin, so you can't do that too much, or move on to another item. So while this seems like you can make 20 mils super quickly with a Ripper Demon, you're probably not going to be able to buy all 5,000 for the price you want. It usually either takes a really long time, or you can only flip a couple, but you can still make a decent amount off of just a few. So those are resources, but there are other items that you can flip. So let's just go, for instance, Berserker Ring. So for these, you can buy 10 of these per 4 hours. So I would be perfectly fine checking the margin for these, seeing if there's a decent margin. You'll make a little bit of a loss when you check a margin on things like this. Maybe the margin's 300k. I'll lose 300k from checking that margin, but that means I can buy 9 more. And if I can buy 9 more, make 300k on each one, that's 2.7 mil profit. So it's fine to lose that little bit of cash at first. But here's something you don't want to do. So here is a Torva plate body. As you can see, the buy limit per 4 hours is only 2. So if I bought one, checked the margin, lost maybe a mil, maybe the margin's 1 million GP, well then I can only buy one more, and that means I'll basically just be breaking even. And you could say, well, maybe after the 4 hours are up, you can buy 2 more and make more money. By then, the margin has probably changed and you'll need to check it again. So you don't actually want to physically check the margin with things like the Torva plate body, but there is something else you can do for items like this with low buy limits. So this is the price check and trade Discord. There's tons of members in this Discord, and basically you can use this to price check items and get kind of accurate prices on them. Now you can't price check everything. Like if we go price check raw chicken, well, nobody's out there, putting in the results for their raw chickens. So you can't price check everything here, but most big items you can. So let's go back to something like the Torva plate body that we recently talked about. If we go to price check Torva plate body in this Discord, it should soon pop up with a price check for us. So there's a price check. So you can see the most recent is 1 day ago. This instantly sold for 194 mil. So this is a way that you can kind of find out the price of an item without actually having to physically price check it. This is great for bigger items that you can't price check the margin on without losing too much money. So let's say I wanted to price check a Zeros God Sword. I can type that in, and as you can see, we can see 2 days ago, 619 mil. And then other people are price checking in here, but we can price check other things. Let's see, Greater Ricochet Codex. Should come up in just a minute. There's our Greater Ricochet. You can see 9 hours ago, 1.979 bill. So this is an easy way to basically get not the margins, you have to do some guessing. So you can see this Instabot for 1.98 bill. So that's what somebody's instantly buying it for. So what you'd want to do theoretically is put in an offer for this Greater Ricochet for lower than that Instabot price, maybe 15 mil below. And then you try to wait for it to buy and then sell it for that price. Obviously, as you can see, 5 days ago, 4 days ago, the price on big items can change rapidly. That's why there's always a risk. But that is basically the basics for flipping. So there's a lot more, tips on how to find items. A lot of it is more just kind of, trial and error. You kind of will test out and find what items work for you. And flipping is not merching. Merching is when people buy tons of items and they speculate that they'll go up and they may hold them for a little bit of time, they may hold them for a long time. Flipping is not merchanting. Flipping is basically you're buying an item and you're usually selling it within a few hours. There's no theoretically thinking something will go up. It's all just working the small margins of convenience, basically the convenience of people instantly selling their big drops and the convenience of people buying stuff really fast because they want it. That's basically what you're working for. You're the person in the middle making that little margin of GP and essentially flipping the items fast. You can see in the background from flips that I've done before and the GP I made, flipping is honestly a great way to make extra money because it's something you can definitely do. It's AFK because you can quite literally put in an offer or 6 offers in your GE and literally spend 2 minutes and leave for the day. Not play RuneScape, not log in. Then maybe you come back 3-4 hours later and you check on them and you bought a bunch of stuff and you put it back in to sell, and then overnight it sells and you make some money. This is just a great way to make money pretty much entirely AFK, which is why I wanted to include it in this AFK guide, because in 2022 now, items are really high priced, everything is going up, so the margins between items are even bigger, and it's a great opportunity to try to learn flipping and make some money without really putting in much work. Alright, so now we're going to be doing AFK Kree'ara, which is actually still really decent money even in 2022. So the requirements are 70 ranging to actually get into the boss fight itself and the Troll Stronghold quest completed. As for the recommended stats, you'll want 80 plus combat at the very minimum, 95 prayer for soul split and turmoils is highly recommended, as well as 96 herblore for overloads, 67 summoning for a war tortoise at least if you want to bring a beast of burden. However, a legendary pet is probably the nicest option because it can pick up a bunch of drops for you and make things more AFK. Moving on to the useful items, Penance Powder, which was just released, is going to be very nice for keeping your prayers up, which makes it easier to maintain than before. You would normally use a Split Tooth Demon or Dragon Necklace plus a Bone Crusher and then the Penance Aura, but now you can afford to use either Vampirism Aura or even an Amulet of Souls instead if you're using the Penance Powder. A Spring Cleaner is great for disassembling drops or alching them, and then Magic Notepaper for noting the super potions you get as drops. And then you need Overloads, of course. The Ancient Elven Ritual Shard is nice for more passive prayer if you need it. Vampirism or Penance Aura, depending on if you think you need health or prayer. Amulet of Souls, which is not needed, but it's nice to have if you don't need the prayer restoration of the Split Tooth Dragon Necklace. And then the Adrenaline Urn or Persistent Rage Relic is super nice for maintaining adrenaline. Some other useful things for this method is the Stone of Joss boost can give you a 5% damage boost, and then the Holy Wrench can be held in your inventory for more prayer restoration. The Totem of Intimidation can get you decreased kill count. The Gold Accumulator is good for picking up gold. The Legendary Pet, like I mentioned before, for a more AFK experience. And then you have the Penance Aura that can be used for more prayer restore. Vampirism if you need more health. And then if you're fine on both health and prayer and you've tested it out and you're easily maintaining those, you can use a Damage Aura for more DPS in place of those. If like the Amulet of Souls and Penance Powder are enough prayer and health restoration. Then you can use Lantadime Incense Stick sticks, which are nice for increasing your overload timers and saving you a bit of money. And then if you use non-degradable gear, it's really great for saving costs, as you don't really need to go overkill here with Serenic or Pernix. Now, as I mentioned earlier, using the Split Tooth Dragon or Demon Horn Necklace along with a Bone Crusher will turn your bones dropped from Kree'ara and her minions into prayer points, which will help you easily maintain prayer and make for a more AFK experience. Now, you can use this if Penance Aura and Penance Powder are not enough. And if your prayer restoration isn't enough to maintain your prayer, the goal of your setup basically is to easily maintain prayer and health without really having to drink much prayer or ever eat. So depending on your gear, you'll need to find the right balance that works for you. Moving on to the gear setups is very flexible, but I'll show you two examples. The first is a cheaper setup using Armadillo Armor, which is non-degradable, a Royal Crossbow, the Split Tooth Necklace combo, a Quiver, Kiln Cape, and a Ring of Fortune. This is probably the minimum gear I'd recommend for AFK and Kree'ara reliably. As for a pricier setup, you can use Zamorak Anima Core, which is a non-degradable armor, which is probably the most worth it to use here rather than like Serenic. You can use Amulet of Souls, Ascension Crossbows. You can also use like a Wyvern Crossbow, basically tier 80 or above. I have Fleeting Boots, Nightmare Gauntlets, and a Scripture of Wen. So this is an example of a Revolution bar, and then I'll go into the inventory. So for the Revolution bar, you'll want to have Death Swiftness at the front and Revolution ++ enabled with ultimates and thresholds enabled. You'll want to prioritize Death Swiftness at the very start of the bar and then move on to basics with high damaging thresholds like Snapshot and Rapid Fire in there. You can also put Sacrifice on your bar to heal a bit, and if you're really struggling with staying high health, you can put on Debilitate, although you really shouldn't need it. If you have something like Greater Ricochet and Chroming perk, this should totally be used as it's just really good, but I didn't want to include it since I'm not sure how many people have this combination. So as for your inventory, it's really not that complicated at all. You want to bring your overloads, enhanced Excalibur, Spring Cleaner, basically all the stuff we talked about earlier, the magic note paper. You want some prayer renewals and super restores. You're going to have to go in and see how, get a feel with whatever buffs you're using, how much prayer you actually use. For me, I'm probably not going to be using much prayer at all from my penance powder and everything like that, so I just brought a few super restores and a prayer renewal. Of course, you'll want your incense sticks, you'll want to use them as a buff, and your penance powder. And also, if you don't want the minions to aggro you and you're not wearing an Armadillo item, you could bring the Shard of Zeros so all of the creatures aren't aggressive to you. If not, you can bring an Armadillo item, and yeah, the inventory is very simple. You can bring some food if you want. You probably won't need it unless your gear is much cheaper or your stats are lower, and then it's mostly just going to be overloads, prayer, and just all the regular stuff. And also, of course, don't forget the Adrenaline Urn if that's something that you need. If you're not using the Persistent Rage Relic, the Adrenaline Urn is very useful to keep that adrenaline up. So now you just want to go to the God of War's dungeon and get your kill count, and then create an instance, and you'll want to set the spawn speed to fastest. This is to make Kree'ara respawn faster, so then you can kill her faster and get more kills per hour. Then when you go in, you want to basically use everything. Use your penance powder, use your incense sticks, overload up, get your prayers on, turn your aura on, and go and stand in the doorway. This will keep you from getting pushed around, and you'll basically just use your Revel bar, Death Swiftness here, and then just basically AFK and kill Kree'ara. It was really simple, and Kree'ara is super easy to AFK now. I had no problem maintaining my health, my prayer, everything. Really simple, and my kills were actually pretty fast. I think my fastest was like around 20 something seconds, and I was averaging around 35-second or so kills, so not too bad. Now what about the loot? How good is the loot from Kree'ara? How much can you really expect? So I would say you should expect around, if you're getting my kill times, around 70 to 80 kills per hour. I would say you can easily get around 50 or so depending on your gear. If you're using basically any gear setup, even the cheaper ones from here, you shouldn't have much trouble getting like 1 minute kills or so. Probably you'll get a bit less. So basically with 70 kills per hour, you're looking at a little over 8 million GP per the RuneScape wiki. already factoring in like the uniques that you're going to get eventually, factoring in all those prices and stuff. So it's honestly pretty easy to make a good amount of money doing Kree'ara. So I would say it's pretty easily 6 to on the upper end, maybe 10 mil per hour. 6 to 10 mil per hour sounds like a good estimate. You're honestly not going to be using much supplies. We're using non-degradable armor. We're barely using any prayer. We're not using any food. Really, you're just using overloads, ammunition, and whatever, you know, divine charges you use for your weapons and stuff like that. So really not a ton of usage of stuff like that. So yeah, AFK Kree'ara, a nice 6 to 10 mil an hour depending on your kill speeds, and a really nice method, especially if you just want to camp here for a long time AFK, finish off that Kree'ara log, get a nice log done, a nice pet, and make a good amount of cash. Alright, so the last method to end this AFK guide is going to be an oldie, but a goodie, one that still works in 2022, and that is gathering divine charges with the Divine-O-Matic Vacuum. Now this is a go-to method for many people who just want to make some quick cash, but a very simple and AFK method. So for this method, the requirements are 101 Invention, 95 Divination, and 81 Summoning. 99 Divination, however, makes this even faster, and having the Divination Cape perk makes this even more AFK. As for useful items you can use for this method, the Ring of Whispers, Energy Gathering Scrimshaw, can be used to gather more energies, the Nightmare Muspah Pouch, Grace of the Elves, and Luck of the Dwarves as a combination, the legendary Enrichment Aura, and Divination Cape all make this method so much better. As for a gear setup, you'll of course need the Divine-O-Matic Vacuum, and you'll want to make sure you set it to consume all memories and energies. Then you need empty divine charges, which you can buy off the GE, and you want to shove them in your Divine-O-Matic Vacuum. You also want the full Elder Divination outfit, which is very, very good, and the Divination Cape, Legendary Enrichment Aura, and the Energy Gathering Scrimshaw is also recommended and relatively cheap. After you have your setup, you'll want to go to the Incandescent Wisp and start harvesting the nodes, and that's basically it. As you siphon wisps, your divine charges will fill up. It's super simple as a method and has been around for a long time, but it's just really consistent and a nice thing to do every once in a while when you don't feel like getting an elaborate setup or you just want to go and AFK something. You can get around 80 charges per hour, maybe a bit more depending on your setup, and this makes you around 5.5 million GP in divine charges. But of course we have to minus the supplies of the empty divine charges, so you'll probably end up making around 3.5 to 4 million GP profit per hour, super AFK. And that's going to do it for this guide. 90% of this guide was made completely from scratch and took me many days of editing and recording, so if it helped you at all, a like would be super appreciated. I'll try to update the pinned comment and change the GP per hour or let you know if a method no longer works. And thank you all so much for watching. If you want more guides like this, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video.